we won't name vendors.
How much of this information is shared between all of your clients together? I can certainly see, I come from a healthcare background, so there's a lot of even concepts of basic, incident response, incident handling, even uploading to sandboxes. Some people get kind of weary of things like that. So how much of that information, obviously it's heavily risk focused and risk based, but how much of that information is shared between all of your clients, if any?
No, it's a great question, and the answer is none of it today. It's a great question because as soon as you start talking about AI, people are legitimately worried because ChatGPT, for example, has leaked information across users, right?
Absolutely.
And when you build machine learning models, which are constructed out of lots of data from different places, you do run this risk of leaking data from one place into another place, and you have no mechanism, and you can't have a mechanism really, a reliable one, a foolproof one, you can't have it to stop that leakage from happening. There's just no way really to do that technologically.
Sure.
The way we work is we are building dedicated, unique models for every single customer, specialized on their data. And to the extent that there are interesting things going on out in the world at large, SolarWinds or whatever the next thing is, right? We can leverage some of that data to inform the recommendations that are coming out of Reach and the reprogramming that we do of the security systems. But it is driven entirely by the customer's own data.
And that's been a big, so Colt being the technical side of this and myself running the sales organization at Reach, that's been probably one of the more interesting conversations to have amongst you guys, because there's a lot of companies that you've been meeting with and seeing that say they have this model and this, and there's always been that scare around, well, is my data co-living with everybody else's?
Sure.
It's just another way to think about how their data was actually already co-living with other people's data in a non-AI world, right? but same thing, right? And so fundamentally when we built the system, we built with that privacy and that security in mind, and it just so happens that AI became this really big thing and people started to have those questions. But again, that somewhat comes from the experiences of building products where we had to have the opposite discussion of, don't worry, healthcare organization, it sits with other files from other healthcare organizations, but no one looks at them, right? So it kind of it takes care of that.
We're super secure, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'd actually be curious from the ANM side. I mean, we're plugged in from our world, but our world's like this in some ways. We come here and we see a lot of companies that we haven't even heard of before. And so from your side, I mean, what technologies are you seeing your teams and your customers willing to embrace, and why? It doesn't have to be a specific vendor, but like capabilities and technologies that are saying they use AI or using ML, or maybe none of them are being embraced that say they use AI and ML. Like, I'm very curious in that regard.
I mean, if we want to go on the Wayback Machine, silence, everybody bought that. It was AI.
It was ML.
I know, I was being funny. Because I knew he was going to jump in on that.
Oh yeah, somebody from Silence is on this panel. Trust us. Right. Trust us. Trust the math.
Math doesn't lie.
Yeah.
There are numbers, they add up. It's
completely true.
What could go wrong?
It's a good question. I think there's a lot of wanting to jump into spaces. I mean, you have the traditional machine learning models that are out there on different things, like the deep instincts of the world who use neural networks for things, right? And that's been out for a bit. We see clients look at solutions like that, but the things that are like touting brand new AI, I haven't seen anybody rapidly. I hear a lot of talk about it, but I don't see a lot of like, I must have this right now, put it in. It's more so I'm super interested in what this is going to do, but I'm super scared, as you had mentioned, about what this is going to do and what is it going to do, right? And what does this look like? And I think there's this kind of reality too, especially with LLMs. We had made the joke yesterday. It's just autocorrect on steroids to some level, right? With ChatGPT or Bard or whatever. And then how do the positives of that solution outweigh the negatives of potentially what it could do if you used it in the wrong way or put the wrong data in it? And so, from my perspective, it's more so the traditional old school, and I'm going to call old school machine learning, is still relevant in the endpoint space. We see that, right? We see it on the firewalls, as you guys know. But the brand new stuff where I'm seeing AI pop up in specific ways, I haven't seen rapid adoption. I've seen a lot of discussion, but there's also this kind of like fear scenario. It reminds me of like when I was at Cisco and we had the FWSM, and it had automated ACL placement, where it would go place an ACL on a router, and we were super excited about the feature, but no customer would ever deploy it. They're like, there's no way I want my firewall to actually automatically go upstream to a router and put an ACL in place by itself. And that same reaction is kind of how I'm gauging the response from a lot of our clients with AI, the new AI. It seems really interesting, but I'm a little bit afraid of it. Like, what is it actually going to do? So I think there's a lot of it kind of reminds me of, in my long-winded way, of when MDR hit the market. There's like 6,000 MDRs. What is it really? And so I think that's still a lot of our clients are waiting to figure out what is it going to be really. So.
I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing as well, right? I think the big thing, it's great you brought up MDR. I think to me, the problem, as you described earlier, of things getting more simple but more complicated at the same time, right? There's less point solutions out there technically, right? Previously, if you go before like the next-gen firewall, you used to have 5 or 6 different point solutions that now all get collapsed into a next-gen firewall, but these platforms are harder and harder to manage, right? So for a lot of clients that we're seeing today, it becomes an operationalizing problem, right? We still have a negative unemployment rate in our industry, so you still can't find the people to fill these jobs, right? So as we start to see advancements in technologies, I can't say it's another point solution that's using it, it's more features and capabilities of these solutions, right, and how they're doing it. So MDR to me, I think is a big deal right now because a lot of people don't know how to consume the information out of this, right? Our industry seems to have an addiction to data. We want to see all the data. We want to see everything. We want to see behavioral analytics. We want to see it all. But what are you doing with that?
Yeah.
If you don't have a SOC background, you don't have SOC analysts, you don't have incident handling procedures, how are you doing that, right? What I love about what I've seen with Reach so far is one of the most important steps of incident response is the last step. What do you do next, right? What are your lessons learned?
Right.
We responded to this incident, we contained it, we brought the business back up. How do we prevent it from happening again? So when we use a threat-based or a risk-based approach in the actual configuration of how we're operationalizing these tool sets, I think that's something fascinating to me. That's something I've never seen before, right? We're so used to being very, very reactive on a technical level, but not on preventative from a controls perspective, rather than from a configuration perspective, rather than just a technology that fixes this one problem, this one use case.
Yeah, I think you hit on something super compelling that I think you guys really take and blow apart is best practices, where it's like, hey, if you just do all these things in this 50-page document, you are good to go, everybody. And everybody looks exactly the same because we're all in Smallville, right? But that's really not the case, right? And I think you guys take that kind of best practices handbook and kind of go, that's cute, but guess what? It doesn't really apply to half of the things you're doing because I'll pick on Palo Alto, right? Because we've all played in the Palo Alto space where they had the best practice, the BPA assessment, which said if you do all these things, you should be good. But then realistically, you do all those things and you realize, no, that's really not going to protect me. That DAG isn't going to work properly, or that URL filtering is not really what I need. Or if I do this, I completely lock out this, right? And so there's no true kind of customer variable injected into that BPA or any kind of best practice. It's just kind of a black and white from a practitioner that says, do these things, which in security we do a lot of, right? Like NIST is like poof, PCI is like poof, right? And so I think there's this really cool element for you guys where you go, there is kind of this best practice thing, but really it's based on the telemetry that we're getting from your investments and your environment to say, your best practice looks like this. Your best practice looks like this. You are not alike, even though you think you might be. It reminds me of, yesterday we were talking to Christopher and team, and they use the word concierge model and how they deal with their clients. It reminds me very much of that, where it's like, hey, I'm going to tell you what to do in your environment based on your tool sets and your environment based on our algorithmic approach, which to me is something that I think that should be kind of screamed from the rooftops, because it's like, how many times have we pulled out the best practice guide for something and what is this thing? It's not relevant to my environment, and you guys have taken that and spun it around and said, okay, let's really make best practices truly catered to you to be a best practice.
Yeah, we call it, Colt loves this, but or makes fun of me rather, but I think he loves it, it's endearing. We say tweak, tune, and tailor, right?
Ooh,
so it's the idea of like basically tailoring security to you. It's almost as if you went into a tailor and had a custom dress or custom suit or something that made for you. And you start with measurement. Like, where does it start? You start with measurement. You don't want to go to the place like, here, try this code on. Like, okay, roughly this is what it's going to look like. You want to start with measurement, and that's comes down to how you use the data effectively. You know, you talk about this the last step problem. We call it at Reach the last mile problem. It's the shift from being consultative, telling you that you have gaps, telling you that you have some challenges, telling you that there's things you could turn on from best practice assessment, and then having the information and wherewithal to actually provide you the configurations as code or the content that can be staged. If you think about developer kind of infrastructure like staging versus production, stage that to your products and bridge that gap between here was the challenge and here's the optimization that we can use. And I think this is the rather like larger encompassing challenge here that people ignore and don't want to talk about in security, because we want to embrace automation and we want to embrace these technologies. So we'll talk about privacy challenges versus like risk to job challenges. We were just talking to a CISO right before we got here, and he says, I have 6 or 7 people dedicated, my security engineering team dedicated to making these tools hum and work. You're going to come in, and effectively, if your product does what it says it's doing, you're going to take these jobs. And I said, well, you just told us about a very big project you have to go learn how to tackle. Is it a more effective use of your resources' time to go and figure out how to solve that really challenging problem, and maybe they level up and they learn new skills and they get to like hang their hat on this really important project to the president? Or do you want to leave them continuing to do things that honestly are just kind of like it's not great work, it's not fun work, and it's not necessarily productive? Like have you asked them if they like doing that work?
Sure.
Or would they like to go work on this new important thing?
Right.
And that's, I think, the nature of, I think it's the good intention of what any AI technology is trying to do. But that's really our intention here, is solve the scale problem by requiring the current skilled worker to do something more meaningful and more important to likely the business. Like, this project is so important, it has support from the top down. But instead of going and hiring more people to go do just that, is there an opportunity to take current resources and cause them to do that, and can you fill the gap? And that's kind of where Reach comes in. But yeah, the last mile problem was our observation in building the company in the early days was, look, we produced reports and we produced details of what could go and be done, even like the deployment guide itself.
Right.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, like, unless you can actually deploy something, it's even if you're not doing the full push an ACL to a router, like, even just to stage something to be viewed, that became really critical and a separate problem to solve, and one that I don't think any product should be accepted without being able to do the last mile for customers these days. Like, I don't think it's acceptable.
Well, we know what will happen if it doesn't do it.
Yeah, we've lived it for decades, right?
Nothing will actually get done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You probably remember the days of signatures before people trusted signatures to be auto-pushed?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that? Like, there's a whole review process, and you're like a week behind,
Yeah.
and like, oh, we got to review all these signatures. And then we saw this progression at our prior employer and like helped push this, but then it went like 24 hours.
Yep.
What was it? Like an hour.
Down to an hour.
Down to an hour.
It
was like
30 minutes.
30 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes,
5
real
minutes,
time,
1
right?
minute,
So
real
it's like
time,
you had to actually had to do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that's the fun part of it, but it's also the biggest challenge at the end of the day.
It's trust, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
comes down to. It takes time to build that trust.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. But thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we're always curious. I mean, the reach and breadth and scope of what your security program has in terms of the customer base and the differences, right? Like a SLED organization just trying to make it work with budget cuts running the school versus massive healthcare organization that owns everything and kind of everything in between.
Right.
What we've observed is the problem existed everywhere.
Yeah.
But, and there's arguments where you feel it most acutely, but the problem has kind of existed. And so you had offerings to try to solve this for customers prior as well, right?
Yeah, I think we're always trying to, I always say kind of do more with less, right? But it's, in the past we've talked about using automation to, say automation AI, to even elevate SOC analysts, right? Where it's like, okay, nobody wants to be in a tier 1 analyst position forever. It's really the grind. And really this is where, you know, ML and LLMs can become fantastic, right? Churning and burning that data. And then how do you take, instead of getting rid of those analysts, how do you take them and make them grade 2 analysts, so you have more focus on relevant threats instead of the insane noise that happens at one, right? And start building models like that. So that was really kind of early on how we started kind of thinking about these types of things. How do you not replace your people, but how do you take your amazingly skilled team and, like you said, make them happy, right? So they do amazing work, or don't go hire for your new project because you have people who can do that, and you have a platform like yours that comes in and helps push that. So.
Right. Yeah, I think it's an interesting space right now. You call out the SOC analyst. We've been talking to security leaders lately at like massive global companies, and there's this trend of doing away with the analyst model. The idea there is like hire skilled workers that are highly skilled workers, and hire some analysts entry level, but the fastest path possible to being able to respond and handle incidents.
Right.
And so everybody has to take a turn at doing that not so great work so we can find the best ways to optimize and fix it and develop and automate and whatever it might be. And now some of these groups have like literally told by vendors some of the most fantastic automation programs, different programs that are in place because they took they took the entry level people, brought them in with the people that are like, why is this work even being done? Like, this is horrific,
Right.
Like,
Right.
Why would
this
you
is
do
horrific.
this?
It's like when we'd have at our previous employers, you'd have people that would end up on call, right? So you have like the engineers that handle infrastructure, and then you have the engineers that deploy the codes. Like, you're going to be on call for a week, and then they sit there like, oh my gosh,
Right.
this is like we can't go on this way. And so you have these people come together and come up with solutions. I think it's directionally where it's going, and tech in multiple ways is helping that. But you're seeing that trend because like the 3 million number going to 4 or 6. First of all, it can't be real. Second of all, it's like nonsensical to solve it in traditional methods.
Yeah,
So,
kind of think differently.
Yeah.
Not to pun on Steve Jobs there, but.
yeah.
All right. So I want to thank you guys for jumping in and shooting the breeze with us today. And,
Yeah.
is there anything else you want to chat before we go?
San Dimas High School football rules.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly true.
All right.
Awesome.
All
No,
right.
that's it. No, thank you for the opportunity, and I think what we want people to pay attention to, if it's not with Reach, is just can we think about some of these problems differently. That's why we have talks that at this B-Sides as an example that thinks about that. It's like, what's the precursor to solving these problems?
Yeah, you would get people thinking.
Yeah, because you're going to spend a lot of time down there with marketing that doesn't want you to think.
No, it's very true. I
Like,
think that,
In fact, it depends upon your not thinking.
Yes, yeah, yes. So, and that's not necessarily the fault of any particular vendor or industry at whole.
That's
Like,
just
that's
sort of
just
should be the paradigm.
It's
Yeah.
just it, right? Like, we're no different than other industries, right? It's
No,
just
we're
is
not.
what it is. So, no, but thank you for the opportunity.
yeah, appreciate
Thanks,
you
guys.
guys.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so
guys.
much.
Yep.